of 2022. And I'd like to welcome you to our meeting, those who are in virtual land and those who are here with us today. To start off our meeting, I'd like to have Director Tom Stallard lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
the United States of
the
America,
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
with liberty and justice for all.
So I hope the 70-degree weather in Sacramento is very nice for you. Good, good. I feel the same way. I feel like I can take my jacket off and not sweat my shirt out. So with that, Madam Clerk, Renee Garcia is going to be working with us today. So we welcome you to this meeting. I know you're going to do a fabulous job. So would you make any housekeeping announcements and then take the roll for us as well?
Yes, good morning. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed via our website. Just a friendly reminder to mute yourself when you are not speaking. And if you are a member of the public and wish to make a public comment and you are participating remotely, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating telephonically. If you are a member of the public and are participating in person and wish to make a public comment, please fill out the public comment request form and turn them into me. Okay, Directors Baines.
Present.
Hottishelt for Bernasconi,
Here.
Bradford,
Here.
Branscombe,
Here.
Bolahan,
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Clark Kretz,
Here.
Desmond,
Here.
Frericks. Absent Frost. Absent Gallardo,
Here.
Gog,
Yes.
Gore, Guerrero,
Here.
Boomgarden for Harris,
Here.
Jennings,
Here.
Joyner,
Here.
Kozlowski,
Here.
Lozano,
Here.
Middleton,
Here.
New,
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Thank you. Saragosa,
Here.
Saylor,
Here.
Chenier,
Here.
Spokley. Absent Stallard,
Here.
Soon,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
West,
Here.
Vice Chair Kennedy,
Here.
and Chair Jennings. I know I already called you in the roll. And ex officio member Benepal.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We will now move on to public communication. This is a time for anyone who wishes to address the board on an item that does not appear anywhere else on the agenda. Renee, did we receive any public comment, or is there any member of the public that wishes to comment?
We do have a member of the public that wishes to comment via Zoom. Would you like me to go ahead and allow them to talk?
Please.
Okay, Michael Harris. Michael Harris, you are available to give your public comment. As a reminder, you do have 3 minutes. I will start your timer for you and I will give you a 1-minute warning.
Okay, well, thank you. And SACOG board, it is an amazing blessing and honor for me to share with you the importance of Juneteenth, not only to people of African descent, but our entire nation. As the past regional director of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, y'all been blessed not to have to deal with me too much because we were running around Washington, D.C. helping make a federal law happen. And so now, thankfully, the Juneteenth official flag is flying over the seat of the 5th largest economy at the new offices for our state headquarters of the while the Capitol is being remodeled. The official Juneteenth flag is flying over the state of California as I speak to you today. And that's just, you know, as somebody born here, it's just amazing that the authentic story of people of African descent, not only in this area, but 1,918 color troops left California, freedom in California, and fought, bled, and died in the Civil War. 10% of the U.S. colored troops that helped preserve the Union and, of course, begin the legal journey to end slavery, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And, you know, there's still some work needs to be done, particularly as it relates to those that are incarcerated. Because slavery, you know, if you got a good lawyer, you're enslaved, or if you got a good lawyer, you might not be free. And that's being dealt with. But the idea that here in my birth home, Sacramento County, we have a greater role, responsibility, SACOG does, because of the conveyance systems that brought people of African descent here, both by land and sea, over land and by sea. There was a lot of people of African descent. As Caltrans knows, the 15 miles of Highway 50 was named after the African founding father of California, bipartisan support led by Dave Cox and Merv Dimley and our mayor now, Mr. Steinberg. That legislation thankfully allowed the sign that was burned down to be put back on the highway. A little bit smaller, but hey, the highway is a little bit tighter. But the idea that the African founding father, his steamship is on the state seal, the first railroad west of the Mississippi, from Sacramento to Negro Bar.
Michael, you have 30 seconds left, just as a note.
So yeah, I'm going to have to leave y'all, but I do like what's happening with SACOG, the RET, item 24. I'm all in support of that. I will lend my effort and some of my expertise to that. But I want to thank y'all, and again, consider everybody having Juneteenth as a paid holiday in your jurisdiction. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else?
We do not have any members of the public that would wish to speak at this time.
Good. So I just want to kind of add on Michael Harris's comments on Juneteenth just for a second. This weekend, a lot of events are going to be happening in the city of Sacramento to honor Juneteenth. And if you'd like to attend any of them, there's going to be a Juneteenth festival on Saturday at Land Park. There's going to be Gospel Under the Stars, again at Land Park in the theater. And then it's going to be a block party at Esther Park in Oak Park. So there's going to be a lot of events that you can participate in. And I encourage you, if you'd like to know more about Juneteenth, like to participate in this holiday, this is a way to get started. So I just want to thank Michael for calling in and making us understand a little bit more about Juneteenth and the holiday and why it's important. Okay, good. So we're going to start this meeting off with the next agenda item, which is a very important agenda item. This is our Youth Leadership Academy graduation. And I'm going to ask Rosie Ramos to come up for a minute. But while she's coming up, if you don't understand the history of the YLA, Youth Leadership Academy, you got to understand that a young man by the name of Jay Chenier, who's a member of our board, he started this Youth Leadership Academy with the mindset that we develop our youth to be leaders of today and one day sit on boards like SACOG and each of the boards that we sit on and take the responsibility for leading this great region that we all live in and love so much. And so with that said, I want to thank Jay for starting this and making this an integral part of SACOG and the Sacramento region fabric. And I also want to thank him for sending us one of his leaders who's going to come up and speak to us today, right? And she's going to do a great job. She's going to be nervous. She's going to be excited. She's going to want to try to put in more information than she has time, but that's okay. We're going to give her as much time as she needs. We're going to let her know that she's loved, that we care for her, and that we can, even through her nervousness, we're going to hear the message that she's trying to portray for each and every one of us. She's going to do a great job because she knows that everyone in here is with her. So even if she makes a slight mistake, it's nothing that we haven't done as well, right? So she's got to let her know that it's okay. It's okay. Because she's going to do what? A great job. So Rosie, take it over.
Well, thank you for that great introduction. Yes, many, many thanks to Director Chenier for having started this program. I was around when we started, and I can attest it was scary and it was something new that we hadn't done, but I can honestly say it's been something that I'm so grateful to have been a part of and has become one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do here as a staff member at SACOG. But good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to be here. First presentation in person in a long time. it's 4 years that we've been doing this, and it's so exciting. That's 150 students over the last 4 years that we've been able to connect with and share the work of SACOG, the work that your local agencies are doing. This year we had 12 sessions that was hybrid, mostly all online because COVID, but we still managed to do an in-person field trip to the airport, which was really great. We had a session a couple weeks ago right here, and students heard from staff members at the city of Sacramento on transportation, and they got to enjoy this really great room and get to sit at the chairs that you all sit in. We've had great conversations with fellow directors, Director Soon, Director Gallardo, and Thomas, and Director Chenier have all participated and have really great conversations with our students and answered tough questions. And sometimes they didn't know the answers, and that was okay. We had those conversations about knowing that it's okay to say we don't have all the answers at one time. We've had many state and local partners present with us. And this year we also added more into the leadership skill development section and really wanted them to understand their strengths. So we added Clifton Strengths Finders. And so that was how we started our sessions, and everyone got their strengths and understand that they have 5 core strengths to keep building on for the rest of their lives. And we really wanted to make sure that they got those skills, that they understood those skills and how to implement them in their school and eventually in their studies and in their work. So it's been a great year. We're going to have our celebration of graduation next week on Saturday here at SACOG. So if you are interested and able to attend, we'd love to have you. It's going to be 9:30 to 11. It's going to be final presentations. So you can see what students have been working on and what they've learned about. And then from 11 to 12, we'll have the ceremony and a lunch reception. We'll also have a Zoom option as well for those of us that can't make it. We have some students that are traveling already, and so they won't be able to be in person, but we'll be on Zoom, so you can also access the Zoom portion of it. But that's enough of me. So again, if you do want to participate in graduation, reach out to me. I'm happy to add you to just so we know how much food to order, but it would be great to have you. And so without further ado, I do want to pass it on to the real star of the program, Ariana Takor.
Hello, I'm Ariana Sakur. I'm a freshman at Oak Ridge High School, all the way in El Dorado Hills, and I was a member of YLA this year. It was a great experience. I went in nervous, and I didn't really, I was just excited to learn, but I ended up coming out, I built confidence. I learned many things from the guest speakers we had, from the people around me. I got to interact with, people my age who are doing great things, and it was really inspiring. So I got to talk to a couple of different guest speakers, and I got to learn about everything from transportation to, to housing and a bunch of other things. It was really informative. It's stuff that I would never have learned about if I hadn't joined YLA. And it's stuff that I care about. And with the final projects that I'm going to be presenting on graduation day, I'm actually going to be, going in depth and discussing and learning more about these issues and helping out our community in a way. So, it's something that I'll use when I'm older, something I'm going to use right now, and I would love to do it again. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for having me here. And YLA, it was really just a great organization, and I love doing what I did there.
Ariana, good job.
Happy to take any questions. You are welcome to join us as a peer coordinator next year, so you're always welcome back to the program.
Do any of the directors have any comments that they'd like to give to Ariana at this time? I see a hand up. Wendy.
Well, Ariana, I am just so proud that you are from El Dorado County. And I just want to thank you for taking part in YLA. And you just articulated, I loved your enthusiasm, your passion for learning, and just so proud that you are representing our county and our region and the voice of our youth, which is so critically important. So well done, and keep going on this journey, because you have a bright future ahead of you.
Anyone else? Darren.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. Ariana, it was great to meet you and all the participants. I was just wondering if there are any particular subject matters that were your favorite?
One of the most important subject matters to me was like the matter of how we get our food, how we get healthy food, how we keep the bad food out of our systems, and how we get food to people who need it. that's actually what I'm going to be doing my final report on. So I've gotten a chance to, research about it and learn more. But
Fantastic.
All right. Anyone else?
Ariana, hello. I'm from Folsom, and we have a very friendly rivalry between Vista Del Lago High School and Oak Ridge because we are less than 2 miles apart as the crow flies. Very pleased that you're a neighbor. I'm curious, as you went through the YLA process, did you think differently about any particular transportation issues affecting El Dorado Hills? Because Folsom and El Dorado Hills kind of share connections.
for me, so we were talking about transportation in Sacramento, and Sacramento is a big city. There's public transportation available, and El Dorado Hills, not so much. Everything is far apart, so walking isn't really an option. It's really hilly. So one thing that I'd love to see, I guess, carpooling. That's something that we should work on in our own city, since public transportation isn't an option, since everything's kind of spread out, and it'd be hard to incorporate from what I see. So, carpooling and working with the people around you is a really good way to, work on, I guess, reducing, emissions and stuff. But it's interesting to see how the big city compared to, the small town that I live in.
Very different circumstances. Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Tom.
I just want to mention that I had the pleasure of running into one of our grads from last Saturday, and she said she really missed the program and she learned a lot. And it's great to know that there's that downstream, it's paying forward, that as these students have the opportunity that you've just completed, you'll be carrying it with you. But it's nice to know that we have 150 graduates now, and you are our leaders of tomorrow, and you're starting right now. So congratulations. Thank you.
Director Gallego.
Thank you. I'm so pleased. I honestly think this is such a critical, important program, and I'm so pleased to see the caliber of the students that are there. I think one of the benefits of SACOG for me is that we're making connections with all the other cities and counties in our region that will go a long way in things that we can do to benefit our region. I'm just curious, and I know it was challenged because of the Zoom feature and not necessarily in person, but do you feel like you'll be able to connect with your graduating class and this group after the fact? Because I expect to see all of you sitting in our seats later.
So there's, a lot of us, people that I know, they come from, the same school that I go to and schools around me, like, Vista is a school really close to me. So these people I see, in my daily life, and I've gotten, another opportunity to work with a few YLA members through another organization. So, I'm going to be seeing a lot of them at all these, leadership opportunities and stuff. So I'm glad that I won't lose contact with them. And, I actually know a few of them personally. They're friends of mine before I came into this thing. So YLA has only helped us grow closer. So
Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
Renee, am I missing anybody? Want to make sure I've got everybody's whose hand is up.
We do have a hand up, but it's a public comment. They were having some technical difficulty at the beginning of the agenda, but I'm happy to pull them
Public
in
comment
whenever.
on this item or just public
Actually
comment?
on Zoom. Yeah,
Okay, so we'll finish this and then we'll come back to that.
perfect.
So Ariana, I just want to thank you on behalf of the entire Council of Government that you're here today. You did a great job. I speak on behalf of all of us. We heard your confidence that you said you got as a result of being in this. We heard that you learned a lot from being in it and things that you wouldn't have learned at school necessarily that you picked up by being a part of this. And we also heard you say that it was inspiring. And we heard that in your voice when you presented. You did a great job. And I want everyone to give her a round of applause if you will. And I just want to let you know that your future is bright. And whatever you need in order to achieve your goals and aspirations from this day forward, whatever you need, you're a part of a family that can make that happen. So where I come from, we say a closed mouth don't get fed. All you got to do is call. And whatever you need, whenever you need it, we will make sure to take care of it for you. Okay, we'll see you at graduation. All right, one more time, round of applause. Thank you. Okay.
We do have one more board member that would like to talk, Director Young.
Okay.
Okay, the mute didn't want to go off. I'm sorry. So I did raise my hand. I know I haven't been, acknowledged as being actually there yet today because I'm part of the CBR board. But at the same time, I was there since the beginning of this whole academy, and I'm just excited to see how much it's grown and just to see the confidence that it's instilling in our young people. I am such a youth advocate and mentor. That's my passion and my background. And just to see that 150 have already gone through the program, it's just exhilarating and exciting. So I just wanted to say it was a very good job, great job by both presenters, by the one who's over it and as well as the young person who spoke as well. And then just thanks for the chair too, the assistant chair that's so excited and encouraging. I think that's just really important. And I just love to see that exude throughout the whole organization. And I'm looking to try to bring this to SJCOG since I'm as a part of that organization. I already wrote the note down so that we may be reaching out to you to come and give some input to help us build a program such as this there.
Thank you, Director Young. And I just want to just stop for a second because I don't think we do this enough. I want to thank Director Chenier once again for his vision, for his leadership, for thinking about the future and investing in our youth right now. And this is an incredible program. This is what our mayor talked about yesterday at the State of the City address, investing in our youth. It's the best thing that we can do. And he has been an advocate for youth for the 12 years that he's been on the council, for all the years that he's been on the SACOG board. I just want to thank Director Chenier for the great job that he's done all these years. And I deeply appreciate him as I realize that he's going to be leaving us very soon. But give him a round of applause if you will.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Chair Jennings, can I also just really want to thank your staff and Rosie Ramos in particular, who just presented. It is the passion that your staff brings to these things that makes them a success, right? And that's what you've got in Rosie, as you do with a lot of the other staff. And so she deserves a ton of credit for putting passion and heart and soul into making this program a success.
All right, Rosie Ramos. Good job, good job. Okay, we will now move to the SACOG consent calendar. And these items are intended to be approved in one motion. However, anyone can remove an item for a separate discussion. A director can remove an item. There's someone from the public they may want to remove an item. Renee, do we have anyone at this point in time that would like to remove an item for separate discussion?
We do not have that, but we do have a public comment that was requesting to make one. Would you like me to allow him to make that now?
Let's do that now.
Okay. JD, you are live if you would like to make your comment.
I thank you for having me on your board of directors here. I'm just simply trying to figure out why is it that people like me, because I'm an ADA, who've been going through a rough time in Sacramento, how come ADA people can't get low-income housing? I'm disabled because I'm a victim of a medical malpractice. I'm pretty much confined to my room, pretty much confined to my bed. And I've asked a lot of people in Sacramento to please help, and I've been ignored. I was in an unsafe house that caused me to fall. I went to DHA in my wheelchair and asked for help, and I was told to leave. I'm not understanding, since I helped build Sacramento. I used to be a union carpenter. I've built bridges, schools, courthouses, juvenile hall, and Eschaton Village, a few of them for senior citizens. I'm being cheated out of my income, and I'm being told that nobody's ever going to help me. I think the way that Sacramento County has treated disabled people should be ashamed of yourselves. I've went to a few organizations that said that they could help ADA people, And I was told that, yes, we help people who are going to be homeless. Steps forward. They lied. Sacramento steps forward. I was told that, yes, they do help people like me, but I was told they're not going to help me, so I need to stop living in the past. I'm on Social Security disability income, and I can't afford nothing. I've lost my vehicle so I could have a roof over my head. And now that I have some sort of roof over my head, I have continuous ongoing problems because it's not ADA required. I have a titanium metal cage in my back from UC Davis as a scientific experiment that has failed miserably. It hinders me on my everyday life. And it's sad that nobody will take responsibility from UC Davis. So now I have to have emergency surgery to correct the problem so I can have some sort of normalcy in my life. But in the meantime, I still have to deal with steps on a regular basis that an ADA should never have to deal with. Because if
Katie, you have 30 seconds left, just as a note.
Okay, my surgeon who's doing the emergency surgery told me if anything happens to me on those steps, I could be disabled for life or dead. And I've asked for help and nobody will help me. Will you guys help me, please?
Well, I want to thank you personally for calling in and reaching out for the help. And I'm sorry for those who haven't helped you in the past. But what we'll do is we have your name and number, and we will find out your jurisdiction and find out where is the best place in order to get the kind of help that you need. And so my commitment to you is, if it's no one else but from my office, we will be in touch with you. And my name is Rick Jennings. I'm a City of Sacramento council member. So either someone from my office or someone from SACOG will be reaching out to you directly in order to see the type of help you need and help put a plan in place to get you the help and support you need. Okay?
Rick, I thank you for your time and all the board members. You guys have a good day and be safe. And I hope somebody gets in touch with me.
No, they will. Trust me. It may be me, but we will get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Saragosa in Placerville. I noticed he said he also was a union carpenter, and that's obviously one of my clients. So happy to help out if jurisdiction falls outside of, if it's just for you two, Rick. So I'll help you out there as well.
I had your name written down already, Mike.
Sounds good.
Next part of the action plan. That's good. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else want to pull an item? Anyone wants to speak to an item?
We do have another member of the public that would like to make a comment, if you would like me to pull them in.
Okay.
All right, Jeffrey Tardagia. You are live and have 3 minutes to make your public comment.
Well, Rick, I have not been on SACOG this year due to a lot of other reasons and conflicting meetings. I'm hoping I have put in a written comment for item number 13. I hope that the clerk will read it. In the meantime, I appreciate seeing what is going on, and I do watch through YouTube to see what work is happening and going on through there. And I am disappointed in our lovely governor not getting more money into SACOG for dealing with the fact of the 19% overview of what's needed for this region. With that public comment, I will offer is lots of things are happening and going on. A lot of things in the disability community is going on, and a few other things are happening. And I will continue listening as I participate with the California Retired Americans as we have our ledge on the various legislation efforts. Among others is dealing with Social Security right now. So I will leave that at you and say thank you guys. And I am listening, and I do watch you guys, even when I'm not, should we say, you don't hear my voice.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded.
Okay, just confirming I have Kozlowski and Baines. Thank
Any
you.
further discussion? Seeing none. Renee, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Directors Baines,
Aye.
Hottishell for Bernasconi,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Holohan,
Aye.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Desmond,
Aye.
Frericks, absent Frost, absent Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Gore,
Yes.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Garden for Harris,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Aye.
Lozano. I will mark him absent for this vote. Middleton,
Aye.
New,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Stokely,
Yes.
Stollard, Soon,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
West,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kennedy,
Aye.
and Chair Jennings.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
And Lozano was an aye.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you. We will now adjourn as SACOG and convene as the Capital Valley Regional Service Authorities for Freeways and Expressways, better known as CVR SAFE. Renee, would you please update the roll call to include any members attending from CVR SAFE or who have arrived since you made the initial roll call?
Yes, attendance will remain the same with the addition of Nancy Young.
Okay. Okay, the CVR SAFE agenda contains the following consent items. 1, approve the remote board meeting. 2, approve minutes from the May 19th, 2022 board meeting. And 3, approve the final CVR SAFE full year 2022-2023 budget. 3 items. Is there a director that has a question or a comment about any of those 3 items?
Move to approve.
Bradford will second.
Hold those for a second. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on these items?
We do
Renee?
not have any members of the
Okay.
public.
So who made the motion?
Martha Guerrero.
Okay, and seconded?
Bradford.
Bradford second? Okay. Lynette, not Lynette, Renee.
That's okay. It's
Our
a pleasure to
regards
be
to
called Lynette.
Lynette.
Directors Baines. Hottishell for Bernasconi,
Yes.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Holohan,
Aye.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Desmond,
Aye.
Frericks is absent, Frost, absent, Gore,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Garden for Harris,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Aye.
Lozano,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
New,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Stokely,
Yes.
Stollard, Soon,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
West,
Yes.
Wynn is absent, Young,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kennedy,
Aye.
and Chair Jennings.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. We'll now move to the action portion of our agenda. Item 13 is the first action item. Consideration of action related to the Sacramento County's Transportation Tax Initiative. Our SACOG Executive Director, James Corliss, will present this item.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Jennings. I'm going to just walk through a brief summary presentation. Before I even begin, I just want to, I'm sure you'll do the same, Chair Jennings. I just want to thank the many SACOG board members who were part of this and helped us get to where we are this morning. Point this to. That's a much better idea. I should not be given those things. Okay. So if you could advance the slide, Katie. So I, once again, just appreciate the, I think actually excellent, hard, challenging discussion you all had last month at the May board meeting. And again, just as background to remind us all, this is really pertains to the Citizens Initiative, the tax measure in Sacramento County, as you saw in the memo and the analysis from May, and again in your cover memo and background for today. It's a 40-year measure, half-cent sales tax increase, $8.5 billion, an expenditure plan that then directs revenues to roads, highways, transit. The issue, as you remember, is there are at least 26 capacity projects that are not in our current and the currently adopted SACOG MTP SCS for the 6-county region. There was greenhouse gas language in the 2020 version of the measure that was changed, which we believe increased quite a bit of risk to the region and our ability to compete for funding. And those risks were spread across a 6-county region. Next slide, please. Okay, so hope you had a chance to digest what's both in that one-page agreement that will be converted into an MOU and the cover memo describing this agreement. And I'll try to do the best I can to explain this as follows. For the many, many projects that are currently in our plan, in our long-range plan, our MTP SCS, there's no change to how they would normally proceed. It is the regular process. And as I said on the previous slide, it is really about the capacity increasing capital projects that are not in the MTP SCS where the risk comes from and where this agreement really focuses. So at high level, as is described in the one-page agreement, SACOG and a third party will conduct a greenhouse gas analysis of the entire measure, the expenditure plan, and the capital projects not in the current MTP SCS. The deadline for that work is the end of December 2023. SACOG will develop recommendations for mitigation. Project sponsors should follow those recommendations. But if SACOG and a third party, the third party analysis deviate, STA and SACOG must confer. And there is $510 million available for mitigation from those measure funds. So next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the impact. So what does this mean? Well, we believe, which is why we're recommending approval of the framework this morning by the board, it allows a far better chance of our region meeting our regional greenhouse gas target. That was the risk that we outlined last month for you. I know for the other 5 counties represented in SACOG, you've had lots of questions. I've been asked by some of you, look, if we follow the regional process or the MTP SCS, we work to bring our projects into the MTP SCS. Am I protected if some of these projects in the initiative that are not in the MTP SCS move forward and try to advance? And the answer to this question is yes. You are protected in the other 5 counties because the language requires those projects to mitigate their greenhouse gas impacts. In terms of the schedule and the SACOG staffing, and we put this in the very last point in the memo, STA will fund this analysis work. This is not a small amount of work, but it's important work. It's work that we think we should be undertaking as a region and in partnership with our local agencies. Absolutely, our staff capacity will be impacted by that amount of work. But as I said, we think it actually is, per the agreement, important work to be doing. And to be very clear, it's likely that the schedule of the MTP SCS adoption will need to be delayed. We think we can manage that risk, but we also think it's our job to tell you that there's a risk in that. And I'm happy to go into answer any questions on that. The bottom line is that the framework agreement that you have in front of you this morning, we're recommending for approval, is the best chance we have to address and to minimize those risks. Next slide, Katie. So next steps. You're considering approval of the agreement today. I want to be clear, because I think there's been some questions about this. The action before you is to approve the agreement that will lead to an MOU, not to endorse the initiative. That is the action. Other parties should then and really need to approve the agreement as soon as possible. Sacramento Transportation Authority, STA, the Citizens for a Better Sacramento, the initiative proponents, and the Capital Southeast Connector, JPA, as outlined in the one-page framework. Following the framework and approval, there needs to be an MOU developed and signed consistent with the agreement. And that must be done soon because the MOU really needs to be reflected in the yes argument in the ballot language. That's how this will work. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Staff is recommending approval of the framework this morning and providing delegating authority to me as your executive director to sign the final MOU consistent with this framework. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I see Director Chenier with his hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you have public comment that you want to go to first. I just have some comments on this.
Okay.
We do have public comment. I have some written comment. We also have some public in person that would like to make a comment. Would you like me to read the written first?
Let's take the public comment first.
Okay.
And then go to the board comment. And Jeffrey.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions. Do you want to have those part of the board comments? That's fine with me, but I do have some questions.
If we do board comments from the public first, and then put our comments in right after that.
Okay, enough questions first. And then
Yes.
comments.
Say it again.
And I've got questions as well as comments.
Okay, that'll work. Okay. I want to take public comment first, though.
Okay, would you like me to read written comment first?
That'll work.
Perfect. From Dan Allison, Sacramento Transit Advocates and Riders, STAR, understands that efforts are underway to develop a side agreement with the transportation sales tax measure proponents that would attempt to mitigate to some degree the negative greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, impacts of the Capital Southeast Connector. Other capacity extension projects in the measure would have additional GHG and VMT impacts. Transit, walking, and bicycling are beneficial modes of travel and should not serve as mitigation for motor vehicle impacts. Even with mitigation, the land use impact of inducing greenfield development rather than infill would remain. A side agreement with proponents would not be legally binding on Sacramento Transportation Authority, which would administer the transportation sales tax if voters approved it. We remain opposed. And then I have some members of the public. Dan Allison is also in person if you would like to make a public comment.
Good morning, board members. This is my personal comment. It's not the same as the letter that my organization STAR submitted. So I've read the agreement and there's a lot of may, could, might things in there, and that very much concerns me. I would like to talk specifically though this morning about the petition gathering of signatures. There have been petition gatherers out throughout the community, and I've talked to many of them. And I said, so what did they tell you this measure is about? And the responses I got is, oh, it's all about bicycling. It's all for transit. It's going to fix our roads. And I asked each of them, did they tell you anything about a freeway or interchanges or bigger roads? And they all said, no, we didn't hear anything about that. I even ran into a petition gatherer in Berkeley, California, well outside our county. And I told her what was actually in the measure, and she said, I will never gather another signature for this petition. I'm horrified that they told us differently. Why were there so many people out? Because they were getting paid a lot more than any other measure proponents were paying. So they were pushing that one in particular. I recognize that there's always playing loosely with the truth and gathering signature for ballot measures, no matter who the proponents are. But my concern in this case is these are the people that SACOG and the mayor and others have been negotiating with, the people who are not honest about what this measure is really about, who don't want the public to know what's really in the measure. This very much concerns me. Are these the kind of people we're making a deal with? I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we also have a Michael Quigley in person to make a public comment.
Thank you. If I can get this up a little bit higher. My name is Michael Quigley. I'm the Executive Director with the California Alliance for Jobs. I'm also serving as the chair of the Citizens for a Better Sacramento Committee that is sponsoring this Citizens Initiative. I can tell you that the process that we've reached a conclusion to, hopefully today, is really what I believe the most optimal path forward for this county. We've brought together all the major considerations from environmental, economic, public safety, and even most importantly, what the voters want to support at the ballot. Since ultimately this type of process is new from our traditional 2/3 sales tax measures, it is predominantly driven by what the public's priorities are, rather than what planning documents say, or rather than what experts might consider as the best thing. The voters are in charge of this process, and that is reflected in this expenditure plan that we believe is the most balanced approach to roads, transit, other active transportation programs. There's even money for the American River Parkway and creating what we believe is going to be a stronger economy across this region and a better, more connected Sacramento. One of the things that the voters will have a chance to approve once this agreement is solidified by the 4 organizations is also a consensus across different levels of government and across different interest groups coming together for an outcome that will ultimately be best for Sacramento and provide long-term value that voters can support and have assurances that the projects they're willing to self-assess a tax for will be built and ultimately realized. So thank you. I urge your support today, and let's move forward and build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Steinberg.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I want to begin by thanking the board members, the SACOG staff, incredible group of public servants that you have and have hired here, as well as the measure proponents and all the individuals who were involved in our very intensive discussions and negotiations over the last several weeks. I come here today in support of this resolution, a very, very important resolution. And I want to give maybe just a slight bit of perspective about why I feel this is the right thing to do and why I support it. As you know, I had a prior life. I was a state legislator for 14 years and authored the bill that brings us here today, really, as Senate Bill 375. By definition, that very far-reaching bill was a compromise in its time because it does not require, frankly, any metropolitan planning organization to develop a blueprint, and it does not require any city or county to actually follow it. I wish it did, but that was the bill that we got, and it was a very, very good bill and remains a very, very good bill. The truth of the matter is, as we approach these discussions and negotiations, while SACOG as the regional government has the immense authority and power over which projects within a region are ultimately going to be eligible for state and federal funds, that's the MTP. SACOG has no authority or any role really in determining whether or not any county funded projects can or cannot go forward based upon whether they are improving or not improving the climate. And so what we have done together over the last couple of weeks, I believe actually sets a very positive precedent. Because when you step back here for a moment, here's what's really happening. 375 said that we need to approach planning and transportation regionally and that climate matters. The tension, creative tension, is what role does a regional government have in telling a city or a county what it can and cannot do? That's the creative tension here.
Mayor Steinberg, you have 30 seconds just as a note.
I'm sorry, thank you. What we are doing here together is we're actually bringing SACOG to the table and giving them some authority and say in helping collaboratively fashion a better county transportation measure. And that's why I think this is good. Last comment. I know you're not taking a position on the initiative itself, but by coming together in this way, we have a chance to meet many important goals, reduce congestion, create jobs, and at the same time, protect the climate. I commend this agreement to you. Thank you.
Okay, next public comment in person is Josh Wood.
Sorry, I'm gonna switch it up here. Thank you so much for all your hard work on this measure. I know there's been a lot of conversations and meetings to be had, and we really appreciate all the time you guys have spent on this. My name is Michelle Willard. I'm with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I'm the Chief Public Affairs Officer. Our president and CEO does support this measure, and it will be going before our board for additional support. It is so important that our region focuses on high wage, tradable sector jobs, and we continue the economic development success of our community. In this measure, you guys are supporting the California Mobility Center, and it's so important to focus on future industries and zero emission vehicles and tie our economic development with what the state of California is doing. And we are 100% in support of this measure and hope that you guys move forward with it. And thank you so much for your hard work.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Wood with Regia Business, and I just wanted to come and make a couple of comments. First, there's a lot of thank yous. This was a very difficult discussion that had to happen with different perspectives, but thank you, Michael Quigley, first of all, with the Alliance for Jobs for bringing this measure to us in our community. We're going to be the only community in California this year really looking at how do we fund the transportation infrastructure that we need for the future, as all the other measures that looked at doing this have not made it to this point. I also wanted to thank Mayor Steinberg for his leadership and getting everyone in the room and pushing us to a conclusion, as well as you have Chairman Rick Jennings here, who was part of those discussions, Mr. Kozlowski, Portia Middleton from Citrus Heights, Darren Soon from Elk Grove, Michael Saragosa, you're on the screen, so I'm pointing to you that way. David Sander, who on your board, was part of that, as well as Don Saylor. It was a really good discussion, and we got to what I think is the most important thing, which is figuring out a pathway to make this measure happen. At the end of the day, the measure was based upon the 2020 measure that was the result of about 100 public meetings and was approved by every council in our region. There were some slight changes in order to make it fit with California law, because we're doing it as a citizens initiative. And we were able, I think, to work through a pathway together to make it so that we can bring $8.5 billion of investment into our transportation system, so that we can have the roads and we can have the light rail and all the other multimodal transportation infrastructure that we need to move our region forward. And of course, we're excited to see 510 million being able to be available for mitigation, as well as 100 million going to the California Mobility Center, which could be the most important economic initiative we've had in our region to date. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for all of you for working together with us to get to this conclusion, which we believe is good for everybody.
Okay, now we have some Zoom public comment. I'm going to go ahead. Glail, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You are live to make your public comment.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Glail Saba, and I work with several groups, climate change organizations in town. We all know that we're in a climate emergency. Though the measure is bankrolled by powerful developers, it is marketed as a citizens' ballot measure. Taxpayers will pay $8.5 billion to add to sprawl, worsen our air quality, and take us in the opposite direction from the critical need to decrease vehicle miles traveled. It is harmful for the health of Sacramentans. It will worsen air pollution, which is a cause of worsening asthma, heart disease, lung disease, and even Alzheimer's. It will also risk our chances to receive state and federal money. A compromise will still add to GHGs and worsen our chances to get to carbon zero by 2030. Sacramento City, County, and SMUD have passed resolutions for reaching carbon zero by 2030. A proper $8.5 billion transportation measure would fund 21st century public transportation, bicycle highways, and invest in more jobs and infill development, not sprawl. Thank you very much for voting no on this measure, on this compromise.
Great, thank you. We now have Jeffrey Tardigue who would like to make a public comment on this item. Hi, Jeffrey, you're live to make your public comment.
Yes, I am perplexed why SACOG is involved with this. I am certainly do not consider that the Citizens Initiative in any way considered with the master plan on aging, because you have no recognition for your aging community. It is indeed, as the previous author and as others have expressed, basically you're taking taxpayers' money and that has not even yet become a ballot measure to do this. SACOG should have addressed this some years ago about coming up with a good transportation measure for the region, not just Sacramento. And Sacramento is the only area that has had a Proposition A transportation tax available. But all of those are going to end basically by 2030, both SB1 and this. You need to get on the stick and you need to find yourselves a better initiative than this. And has been reiterated for your local planning commission that agreements that are not in the ballot have no significance to them. They're not enforceable, just as been suggested and talked about before. Now, my written comment is I'm for transportation. I want a transportation tax here that works. This doesn't do the job. This is, as has been identified, is increasingly doing things that take us in a direction. And here we are, Sacramento being designated as having poorest air quality in the state. One of 3 areas that have been pulled out and designated not addressing and dealing with it. My written comment, I hope, still stands in there and reiterates, why in the world is SACOG making a separate mediation agreement for taxpayers' money that is not even yet taxpayers designated out there tax? I'm sorry. It would have been nice and have been here. We asked for comments before and it didn't ever happen to address these concerns from the past and why indeed they could not, per California legalese, they could not include the mayor's
You have
former
30
client
seconds left
statement.
as a note.
That's good. I'll finish with that and continue listening.
Okay, that is all the public we currently have.
Okay, let's open it up for our board, our directors. And this would be the opportunity to make comments. And I want to thank the public for their comments that they made. That was very helpful. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. So now we're going to open up for a conversation with our board.
Mr. Chair, I thank you for recognizing me. I'm Director Saylor, for those of you who are in the distance. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask and then some comments if that's appropriate.
Sure.
So my first question has to do with language, Mr. Corliss, in our staff report that plainly states that, let's see, this agreement provides that the STA and the project sponsors follow SACOG's recommendations. That's a plain statement with a period after it in the under discussion analysis on page 105 of the staff report. That seems to be a much more clear statement than I read in the actual language proposed in the June 9th, 2022 agreement. So I'm looking to you and to our council to help me understand the language in the agreement that says STA and project sponsors will follow SACOG's recommendation if there is a significant deviation from the third-party review, at which time the three parties will meet and confer. So there are quite a few ideas in that one sentence. I was a history major, not an English major, but punctuation does seem to be relevant in this instance. So my question to you, Mr. Corliss and Mr. Trost, what does that sentence mean? And how did you conclude that it was a clear expression that the parties will follow SACOG's recommendation on mitigation?
Director Saylor, I guess I'll do my best to answer that, since I think you saw some of this being developed. The agreement as it's written allows us to develop the analysis and to develop the mitigation measures and ask the project sponsors to follow those. The check on that, because that was important to the parties in the room, there's a third-party analysis, right, that provides a third-party analysis. And if there's a deviation between those two, there is a lot that rests in this agreement on good faith, and that's one of those that rests on that good faith.
Mr. Trost, do you believe that this language requires that the parties follow SACOG's recommendation?
So, with the indulgence of the chair, I would like to provide some context for this. So, because this builds on what happened in May and the discussion that occurred with the board in May. This agency is the regional transportation agency under state and federal law for the Sacramento region and all 6 counties and the 22 cities within that region. It has broad responsibility in that role. And among those primary responsibilities is to do everything feasible to ensure that the region meets its regional greenhouse gas target, upon which hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to this region over the next 20 years depend. This board has taken the position over the last couple of years, as has your executive director, that the process through which projects should be funded in the region come through the regional planning process, through the adoption of the MTP and the SCS. And I would note that, even our partners in Placer County and in El Dorado County, where we have independent RTPAs, regional transportation planning agencies, they have worked with this agency over the last 2 decades. They have followed that process. They have brought projects through the regional transportation planning process. This entire board has committed to that process. For that reason, for the past 2 years, and it's reflected in Mr. Corliss's staff report, that the way that things should happen from a regional transportation planning process is that projects should be promoted, sponsored by individual jurisdictions, brought to the agency, and you have the very difficult job of balancing all of those things and adopting a regional transportation plan. And you took the position with respect to the 2020 measure and even last month that projects should be in the plan before they get funded, whether that funding is state, federal, or local. This proposed agreement is a compromise of that. It is a compromise of your regional transportation planning responsibility. It weakens your authority in that regard. It's a compromise. That's exactly what it is. You need to decide that. That's not my decision, but you need to understand the risks associated with it. There are 2 key provisions in this agreement. One provision is that it says that all projects that are within the plan can be funded. That makes sense to us. That's what we've been working for a couple of decades around here. But for projects that are not in the MTP SCS, they must mitigate all of their GHG project level impacts in order to be funded with a local sales tax measure. That's a key provision. It means that, it must say that, and an MOU that is adopted must follow that. Otherwise, you cannot guarantee the things that you have said, which is you will protect the region and its achievement of the greenhouse gas target, and you'll protect the other 5 counties so that their projects are not compromised by decisions made by a single jurisdiction or a collection of other jurisdictions. The other key provision in this agreement is that SACOG will do an analysis of the measure, but also the individual capital projects in that measure to determine whether they will increase GHG impacts and how develop recommendations for how those impacts should be addressed. The agreement provides that STA may commission a third-party study. And if there is a disagreement between the third-party study and SACOG, remembering that it is SACOG's ultimate responsibility to do this work, not STA, not a third party. The agreement says that if there is a disagreement, SACOG's recommendations will be followed. If the agreement does not say that, if the MOU does not reflect that, you cannot assure that the decisions that are made to fund projects in Sacramento County will protect the region against adverse impacts from adopting this measure on your greenhouse gas target, on the flow of federal and state funds to this region. And you cannot make the commitment to the other 5 counties in this region that you have protected them and their projects and their communities from decisions that are made by an agency outside of SACOG.
So
that's my opinion.
Thank you. Do you believe that this language does what you just described it must?
What I'm suggesting to you is that this term sheet suggests that there needs to be an MOU developed to implement it. I'm suggesting to you that the language in the MOU needs to be very clear on that point, or you've not accomplished your objective and your responsibility as a regional transportation planning agency.
I 100% agree with that point. I have another question. There's a reference to $510 million. Mr. Corliss, what is that number based on?
Well, I think that's, again, in the negotiations with the proponents of the initiative. That number is based on potential excess revenues that come in, and it's sort of, I think, spelled out in the term sheet. So they are revenues from the measure itself, from the tax initiative.
Potential excess revenues based on current inflationary trends that may change based on economic cycles in the time to come. Is that what this is based on?
I did not, since I was not, I can't answer that question right now, but just because the proponents have been the ones to come up with that and, and propose it and bring it forward. So I couldn't tell you exactly.
Do you understand that to be the cap of mitigation if necessary, or is that simply a number?
No, I understand that to be what is available for mitigation.
But it's not actually in the number is not in the ballot language, is it?
I think that's the, well, again, that is the importance of this framework agreement and an MOU that reflects it.
Okay. If a concept, an agreement is not in the measure language that's presented to the voters, is it enforceable? If we have an agreement that says, makes a bunch of promises back and forth?
That's one I'd look to.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address that topic. This is an unusual circumstance. This is not like the 2020 measure where we are negotiating over the ballot language. The ballot language is already fixed. It creates an unusual circumstance, and we have an uphill battle to try and assure that the language that we're talking about is enforceable. There are a couple of ways to attempt to do that. And among the provisions that have been included here is that this agreement, the critical provisions in the MOU, must be reflected in the ballot materials. That is, in the yes arguments, in all the arguments, as much as possible, and the yes argument should be approved by this agency to ensure that the voters know that this is how the public agencies will interpret and implement this measure. But I will tell you, there's not 100% guarantee that people may challenge that. They may say it's not in the initiative language, and there is some risk to this agency. One of the reasons why we've suggested that this agreement has to be approved by the agencies listed here is, in some sense, you're depending on the good faith and fairness of those agencies that they will not change their mind in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, but they are agreeing throughout the life of this measure to implement the principles that we're talking about today. And I cannot guarantee you that, but we will do our best to ensure that if you move forward with this, that the appropriate language gets included in the ballot materials, and we will actually work with county council. They have an independent responsibility, but we want to make sure that they understand how the public agencies view the implementation of this measure, particularly on the critical issues that we've talked about today.
And I would just say, Director Saylor, that that last bullet point there about the being reflected in the yes argument that is why this is in this framework agreement. We do believe that is a crucial, critical piece of this, and that all parties need to sign on to that, which is also why it's important that the other parties sign on to this soon, as I put in my presentation. You are the first to go, but the others need to follow soon so that we can make sure that that actually happens.
Mr. Chair, I have two more questions, and then I'd like to make comments, but I'd like to wait after my questions for others. May I ask two more questions?
As long as they are not as long as the last two.
Well, my questions are not that long.
I know, I'm trying to get to other directors if I can. So please.
Two more questions I want to ask about the capacity projects that are listed and the term mitigation. There are 26 capacity projects that you identified. What, can you name a few of them? What are we talking about?
Actually, the best thing to do really is to go back to the analysis we presented to the board in May and to list all those off. I think they're pretty widely known for those 26.
So we're dealing with some very specific projects that we have a pretty good sense of.
Oh yeah, that you have to.
Yeah. Okay. Mitigation, we talk about greenhouse gas mitigation. Does that mean in your mind, as we go forward here, does that support regional targets? Are we talking about mitigation that will support the regional targets for greenhouse gas reduction? Not simply, if a capacity project goes forward, that even is mitigated, gets right back to where we are today, that may not meet or align with the need for regional greenhouse gas reduction per capita.
I understand that there is a lot, as I said, that is about intent and good faith in this. What we are trying to do here is make sure that any projects that are not in the current MTP SES planned or program for construction do not cause us to miss the greenhouse gas target for the entire 6 counties.
That do not cause us to miss the greenhouse gas reduction targets.
Right.
So that's not
in order to do that, projects must mitigate, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish. This is the process that is set up through this agreement.
And the mitigation has to be more than simply steady state, because we're looking at reduction.
It has to make sure that we mitigate to the point that we are not missing our regional target.
And that's your sense of that's what you think we're doing here.
Yes.
With this mitigation language. And
Yes.
that's what our analysis will focus on in the time to come.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'll wait for comments.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe the language in the agreement is that they will not increase GHG emissions. Projects that are included within the MTP SCS go through a balancing process of how we put together a mix of transportation projects to meet the greenhouse gas target. If we're talking about projects that are not in the plan, they must have no increase in GHG, period. They don't get the benefit of the regional mixing or anything because they're being treated outside. So they have to be net zero in that regard.
So I'd say even more than net zero.
Okay, let me get to Director Chenier on the virtual, and then I'll come back to Director Soon here in the room.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I do want to thank James and Kirk and all of our staff that have participated in this endeavor. And I think it goes beyond the past few weeks. There's been a tremendous amount of work and really goes back to the last Measure A, which Supervisor Kennedy spent a tremendous amount of time meeting with those 100 organizations that Josh Wood spoke of. I also want to thank the board members from SACOG who participated in the meetings over the last few weeks. I think it's critically important. And I want to thank the proponents for being willing to sit down and try to work through this. I think their options were to not do that and move forward under current law to do do the initiative without making any compromise here. So it has been a long and drawn out process. I think that as we all know, all of us being elected officials, politics is imperfect and requires compromise to move the needle forward. I think what we have here and today, again, is not perfect and carries some risk with it. I do have confidence in the SACOG staff now and into the future, and I have confidence in those who are involved with us working together for the good of the region. This is an opportunity that probably won't come by again if we don't do this at this point. It probably will not. We won't have another opportunity to get these kinds of funds, in my view, particularly for public transit, to build out projects that are so important to us as we move the entire region and this county particularly forward. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I think we had a really good and important discussion in May. I think there will be additional discussions moving forward, and this will not be endorsed by everyone. There's no question in my mind that there will be opposition. But again, it's an opportunity that I don't think we can pass up. And with that, I want to move the staff recommendation forward to see if we can get this done today.
Desmond seconds.
Second.
Now you get those. Chenier and Desmond,
Yes.
second. We'll
Thank
just hold that while we continue comments.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Director Soon.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. First, I want to also start off by thanking James and all the SACOG staff, the measure proponents, my colleagues on the board, and Mayor Steinberg for his leadership in this effort. It's a very balanced approach to deal with two very important issues: controlling greenhouse gas in our region, but also addressing the many needs of our region, of the Sacramento County and our region, since we all drive beyond Sacramento County. I wanted to just give a little context. You know, I had the honor and privilege of serving as STA chair in 2020 to continue and finish the good work that Directors Kennedy and Chenier before me started and carried forward. And this measure, you know, there was a lot of conversation, as you heard Director Chenier allude to, but also, you know, some things that weren't touched upon. You know, the fix it first mentality of maintaining our road infrastructure, our current infrastructure. 47% of this measure money, 90% of that needs to be allocated towards fixing it first, maintaining our roads and current infrastructure for the first 5 years until the jurisdictions obtain a PCI, a pavement condition index of 70, which is a very high standard. So it really focused on that when we talked about this measure. You know, we heard Jeffrey Tartagia and a public member of the public call in earlier today about you know, the disabled communities and seniors. This measure provides funding for seniors, transit monies for seniors and disabled community. Operations and enhancements for the Altamont Corridor Express, the San Joaquin Rail Authority. This organization, SACOG, is also a member of the mega region, connecting us with the Bay Area, housing jobs. The ACE, Altamont Corridor Express stations that would be served by this measure by us providing funding for those operations. These are all things that are also within that measure. And I can go on and on about trails, pedestrian bridges. You know, we've heard a lot about the capacity projects, and those are absolutely a concern. I am a strong advocate of reducing that. I am a strong advocate for SACOG, obviously serving on this board, and recognize the need for us to reduce greenhouse gases in our region. I'd also like to add the MTP is a document that is updated periodically. And so for projects that are not in there currently, they have an opportunity to be in the MTP eventually. So no one's saying that they're not, there won't be in there eventually. Compromise I view a little differently, as what was mentioned earlier. I view compromise in more of a balance of what these issues, these challenges that I just articulated of what we're trying to do. Sacramento County is not its own RTPA. So, just simply, I would say the STA served as that function by recognizing or determining the needs of each jurisdiction within Sacramento County, what they needed to either relieve traffic congestion, maintain their roads, or help provide trails and active transportation projects within their community. And so, I am very hopeful that we will reach agreement on this process. I wholeheartedly support the conversations that have occurred, the progress that we've made thus far, and I'm extremely proud of this well-intended compromise to mitigate. If you cannot be in the MTP, these projects must mitigate for any greenhouse gas emissions that they would cause. And then finally, I just add a little bit of, we've talked about uncertainty, and whether it's about the model, whether it's about how things will develop. I also add the land use, the concern about land use over time is also not guaranteed. We've just seen a spike in inflation, and housing starts have just, are coming to a halt nationally. So my point is, not only do we have an opportunity here to develop differently over a 40-year period, despite the transportation projects that might go forward, but due to market timing itself, the concerns, the land use development may not occur in the timeframe that the others have raised today. And I'm not saying it's not a concern. I'm just saying that there's uncertainty across all levels. And so when you look at the opportunity, as Director Chenier mentioned, to pursue, this is obviously a long ways to go, and the voters have the final say, to pursue this amount of funding, $8.5 billion over a 40-year period, the rarity of that opportunity that may not come again. Again, I'm echoing Director Chenier's remarks. And this agreement that so many of us have come together and found a balance on. This is not something that we can pass up, in my opinion. And so again, I wholeheartedly support it, commend everybody for the work going forward, and I hope we can move this forward today. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to remind all of us that we have a longer agenda. We have a workshop, someone from Minnesota, and I don't think they want to leave here going back to Minnesota without having the workshop. And I don't want them to do that as well. So I have 2 more board members that are up right now. Those are the last hands I see. 3, I'm sorry. So 3. And so I'd like to stop it at that point in time and try to get to the workshop, try to vote on this, and then get to the workshop so that we can all move forward with the rest of our day. Okay? Okay, Director Zaragoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say a few words, and I'll be quick because I know we have a full schedule here. I had the unique position to be part of this working group and to be outside of Sacramento County. And I can tell you, I feel very confident that this compromise, and I do think it's a compromise, will protect El Dorado County, Placer County, rest of our counties in the six region area. And that it's a very good deal. I mean, this is a totally unique situation. We're talking about SACOG having an unprecedented role in mitigating GHG reductions on a citizens initiative that otherwise could pass, and we have no say over what was going to happen. This is completely uncharted territory. This is a new area. this may never happen again. We'll see if the 50+1 citizen initiatives continue to go forward past where we are in 2022. So I think this situates SACOG in a very good position as we move forward. I think Director Soon made some good points. We don't know what the next 40 years are going to do. We don't know what new technologies are going to come forward that will help mitigate emissions even further. I do think that will come around. We don't know what our transportation will look like in 30 years with automated vehicles. So there's so many unknowns as we go forward here. I do think that the MOUs between the four parties will help have a good bonding so that we know that there isn't going to be something that someone just ignores. I think it puts a lot of pressure on all the entities to do the right thing. And all eyes of California will be on this as it moves forward as well, because it sets a model really for the entire state. So I do think we're in a great position, good position. And I want to thank Mayor Steinberg as well for being part of these discussions, and for staff, especially Casey, Clint. I know, a lot of folks that's put a lot of time into this beyond their regular, job hours. And so I really want to thank them for that. And I yield back.
Thank you. Director Kozlowski. I'm gonna go you then, Doug. Okay, Director Joyner, he yields the mic to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's let me first say this. My approach to SACOG and to items coming before us has always been to be supportive of anything that another community, another county, another city might want to do, as long as it does not harm my city and my county. We are not today discussing the measure, or we shouldn't be at any rate. What we're discussing is the MOU. That MOU, from my perspective, really needs to help the surrounding 5 counties feel that they are protected moving forward, that this is not going to harm us in the future. And what I'm hearing from Kirk is a very serious concern that he cannot guarantee this language does that for us. I also recognize that this measure can go forward, can get approved, and we could conceivably have no agreement in place and no ability to address what are the potential negative impacts of this. I think what's bothering me right now is what feels like a rather last minute nature of this. Even today, we're being asked to rush into this vote so that we can get on with the rest of the agenda. This MOU is not perfect. I'm not even sure it's enforceable ultimately. I think I have no choice but to support it because it's better than nothing. But it troubles me. It does trouble me. So I just needed to get that on the record. I'm very, very concerned about the potential negative impacts on the surrounding counties of this. I think Sac County being able to build these projects to do what they need to do is great, and we all ought to be able to do that. But we've got to work within this SACOG framework to work in the best interest of all of us. So again, I'm concerned about the potential negative impacts. The MOU seems to be attempting to address those. I'm not absolutely certain it does. So it's got to be a very soft yes for me, I think, on this. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will try and keep my comments succinct, but I do want to cover a couple of items that I think should be highlighted before we take a vote here. First of all, I want to echo the thanks for the staff. I think Mr. Corliss, our executive director, has done a magnificent job in shepherding this to this point. It's been complicated. It's been a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But I think we have a good result that we can all get behind. And I tend to be optimistic about these things, mainly because the membership of the agencies that we're asking to sign on to this MOU are us. They're all members of SACOG as well. So we're asking for each of us in this room and our colleagues in our respective districts to act responsibly, to take seriously the great challenges that are ahead of us and our shared responsibility for addressing them. Okay, so I think that you can have agreements that try to seek 100% certainty. Rarely do they exist in life. Okay, there's going to be some vagary. There's going to be some opportunity for further discussion. And this ballot initiative, when we get to November, whatever election day is, that next day is a starting point. It's not the end point. Individual projects will be discussed. Things will come into the MTP. Projects will be analyzed. Projects will change. Circumstances will change. All kinds of things will happen. So to Director Soon's point, I think we have to be able to have some flexibility going forward. I want to also specifically thank Kirk. He has a really specific job. We ask him to give us legal advice. We ask him to seek certainty, as I've just mentioned. And his comments have been consistent through this entire process and on point. And they highlight the risks that we all share, okay? But as I said, we share them with ourselves over at STA, and our the entire reason that SACOG exists is because we have all chosen to cooperate and try and meet these challenging goals together. So I'm very optimistic that that's going to happen. I think the leadership of SACOG is sound. I think that the parties that came in and worked on this language acted honestly and forthrightly. We had some excellent mediation by Mayor Steinberg, and there's good support regionally. And I think that finally, in the summation of this, for me, it's important that we recognize that the MOU language that has been crafted supports and acknowledges SACOG's regional planning role and the reasons why we work together. It sets up a process for analyzing the measure in total in parallel with our update to the next version of the MTP. So the timing is excellent to be able to move certain things into the MTP that qualify for that. It balances funding across the entire work list that's within the project for all sorts of transportation. So multimodal transportation, and balances that with the mitigation that's necessary for those things to become part of the systems that we have. And in the end, this thing will act as a job creation engine for decades for all 6 counties, because not everybody that works on projects in Sacramento County lives in Sacramento County. So I am enthusiastically supporting this, and hopefully our partners at STA and other agencies will sign on to this MOU as well. Thank you.
Okay, Director Gog, you have the last word.
Baines, sorry, that somebody else has a hand up. I just want to make a comment that I'm a team player, kind of going back to what Director Joyner mentioned, that I think, I see all the regions coming together for the betterment of our regions, but representing Sutter County, I don't see any benefit to our region at all. I see it's rather putting us in a disadvantage when it comes to taking funds away from us, whether it's federal or state. I see us losing our fair share. And, the comment was made that this is best for Sacramento. I'm not here representing Sacramento at this point. And I agree with you guys. I think you guys done a great job. I commend staff for, trying to find some kind of common ground to make this palatable. But going back to Mr. Tross, that in the comments, there's some real critical issues and that I have a problem with, and I cannot support this. Director, Saylor as well, I mean, the questions that you had, they're very concerning, and the answers that I got did not make me feel comfortable at all. And so I just want to make it clear on the record why I will not be supporting this.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question about the motion itself that's on the floor.
Okay.
So we heard interpretations from Mr. Corliss and Mr. Trost in response to the questions that I asked. Their interpretation about how the language, what the language means to them, and how that language will be translated to MOUs that will be promulgated between the parties. Does this motion include reference to those interpretations of what our staff believe they're recommending to us?
You want to answer?
The action before you is to approve the framework of the agreement, to delegate authority for me to sign an MOU consistent with the framework.
Okay, and consistent with the way that you and Kirk have described the meaning, is that accurate?
Consistent with the framework that's in front of you in the one pager. Let me say this, Director Saylor, I understand your line of questioning. And on the one hand, what you're hearing is there are no guarantees. There is not 100% guarantee in this. This is a compromise. Absolutely. This rests on good faith. Absolutely. Does it give us a chance? Does it give us a pathway and a process? Yes, it does. And so that's why staff is recommending support. But if your question really is, are there ironclad guarantees in here? The answer is no. And I want to be clear
I
about
agree with that. I'm simply asking if the interpretation of the language that you've shared is the intent of the motion.
Mr. Chairman, one of my responsibilities is to make sure that your actions are clear. And this agreement contemplates things that are going to happen after this board meeting. It is not clear to me, given the statements, and by the way, Director Kozlowski, I really appreciate your comment. I do. It is not clear to me whether the board's direction is that the staff and I pursue an agreement consistent with my interpretation. I've heard comments from board members that suggest otherwise. The staff and your organization needs to be clear about whether that's the interpretation of the agreement you want us to pursue after we leave this room today. You need to provide, the board needs to provide clarity on that.
James, can you speak to the next steps? Just so we're clear what opportunity we have to voice after today's meeting.
Today, you're taking action to approve the framework
of the MOU.
And after that, you're delegating authority to me as your executive director to sign a framework, to sign an MOU, develop an MOU, sign that with the other agencies listed in the staff report, consistent with the framework, the one pager that's in your packet. So this, for the SACOG board's action, this is the last action. And if you remember, this is why we brought the analysis to you last month. So you had some time, even though it feels you had a month, you have some time, but this is contemplated to be your last action direction today with that approval.
So with 3 more questions up, and it sounds like there's still questions in the room as well, and a workshop that we haven't started.
We know this is important. I know our guest speaker understands this is important.
This is exceptionally important. Yeah. And so, and I don't want anyone to believe that I'm trying to rush through this in order to get to the workshop. I am trying to get through our agenda today because I know we didn't just come here to come to the SACOG meeting. But with that said, give me direction as far as the workshop and the rest of the conversation as it relates to this MOU.
You need to take the time you need right now to make sure you give us the direction that's clear going forward. And I know Mr. Maroon's come a long way, and we're very excited to have him and see him. He's also going to be touring some of our suburban jurisdictions and speaking tonight at Citrus Heights Community Center. I'd love him to be able to say a few words, but this is important. This is incredibly important, monumental in front of you.
We will go to the virtual board. Director Gallego.
Thank you. And I apologize. I know you're doing such a great job trying to control the time, but it is so important. I think we all need to get our voices heard. And a big part of it is exactly as Director Joyner mentioned, is the feeling of being rushed on the decision is concerning. Quite honestly, I should just say ditto to what Director Joyner said. We want to support our neighbors. I'm concerned that this is coming in rushed. In particular, I love some of the ideas. The mobility center stands out as one of the things that would be important. But one of the way it was described, we talked about that this is our best chance to minimize the risk to the others. I'm concerned that's not a strong enough wording for me. I need to know that we have eliminated the risk, I guess, to others. And so I do have that concern. I am struggling here because I truly want to support my neighbors. And I think there's some great things in this, but I am concerned about the rush timeline. And I guess I need more confirmation that it will not impact negatively the other jurisdictions.
Director Lozano.
You know, Chair, there were several other hands up before me. I'd like them to go first. Director Sander, Burris, Branscombe, Joyner again.
Jennings, if you read from left to right on the screen up there, if you can see that.
that the order?
That's the order.
Okay. Director Sander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate my colleagues' comments here this morning, and I appreciate all my colleagues who were in the room with us last week working on the language of this MOU. You know, I hear sort of the worry about risk from surrounding areas, or the idea that this would somehow cause direct harm to surrounding areas. And I guess I have a couple of thoughts on that front. One, in some cases, there are transportation commissions functioning in those counties that Sacramento does not have. So you've got a certain level of autonomy in Placer and El Dorado that we do not have in Sacramento, because that function is basically subsumed to SACOG. So that makes this discussion a little unusual. I think you heard Director Schneer earlier mention that STA sort of has that role for us, but not exactly. So it's a bit of an unusual conversation because of that. It's also an unusual conversation because we're talking about a citizens initiative. This is not an STA initiative or a Sacramento County initiative or any of our local governments initiative. It's a citizens initiative, which means the negotiations with those parties are naturally going to be different than they would be if we were just dealing with ourselves. But the good part about this process is, regardless of who initiated this, in the end, funding agreements are going to come from individual jurisdictions asking STA for a portion of this funding from this pool in Sacramento County. That request goes to STA, who in consultation with SACOG under the MOU will figure out, is it fundable automatically because it's in the MTP, or do we have to look at what the mitigation is? That's what the MOU accomplishes. And that, frankly, is more than we've ever accomplished at SACOG in an actual previous measure. Because as we often refer to that, I think it was 2018 process, that never went to the ballot. That was pulled off of the ballot. And so we negotiated something, but we never actually realized any of it. This is the biggest step we've taken forward for integration between Sacramento County funding, with our lack of a local transportation commission, and SACOG. So I view this as a step forward in that regard that we have not accomplished before, because this measure is almost certainly going to the ballot. And I guess there is that threat there, with or without us. So with us and getting a level of agreement that we've never before achieved is probably a good thing. My last comment is about, does this harm outlying areas that don't have, their own transportation commission? And I think Director Gog in particular, there's an enormous amount of new state funding and federal funding coming for transportation, probably an unprecedented amount. And to the extent that this offers Sacramento and projects in Sacramento County a greater match and a greater ability to compete with those, I would say does not harm you. It actually helps you, because as we as a region have an MTP that seeks to balance and seek equity in how we do funding, that means that one portion of our region, a big portion, is going to have an extra funding source to meet our local needs. That's going to free up resources for other projects. So I think if we win on this in Sacramento County, the region also wins in this. This is a win-win for all of us. So I do not see any easy alternatives. This is a 50% window to get this funded. We're not likely to see one of those again. We may be the only one that actually gets through this window. So kudos to us if that actually happens. But I do encourage you, along with the voices of all of those other SACOG board members who were in the room last week, encourage you to support this MOU. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sander. Director Burris.
Yes, thank you. I do want to echo some of the sentiments of Director Joyner. I think that in the context of this conversation, we've muddied whether or not we're supporting the actual tax measure itself with whether or not we're supportive of the MOU. And my interpretation, based on the several conversations I've had prior to this meeting and including this meeting, is this is sort of our best, last, and final opportunity to have, some compromise here. And even though I do feel like these promises are very soft, and my support comes with an extremely soft yes, much like Director Joyner. I think that's really what I'm trying to remember in the context of this conversation is there is the ability to go on without us. This, it's with or without us. And so I'm not particularly pleased with the trust factor being what we're hinging everything on. But I will say that this MOU is a significant step in the right direction based on where we were at the last meeting. And I understand that everybody feels rushed, and I do too. But I do want to say that, again, I'm not particularly happy that this is, again, where we've had to end up. But I appreciate the efforts of everybody who was able to make it so that we had this MOU in front of us today, because from where we were at the last meeting, it sounded like we were already at our best, last, and final, and it wasn't good. So I would encourage our SACOG staff in moving forward, again, to be that advocate as they have been, to make sure that we are doing everything we can to ensure that this is enforceable and that everybody is on the same page and will cooperate with it once an agreement is in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Branscombe.
Thank you. Our executive director and staff have put a lot of time, talent, and prestige into bringing this matter before us. It's supported by the mayor of Sacramento. In circumstances like this, I can see no other path but to vote yes, to support our CEO, our executive director, and staff. And that is backed up again by the mayor of Sacramento. I'm concerned that resistance could look like a no confidence vote. That's overstating it a bit, but when a team like our management team puts the kind of time and again, their prestige into putting something like this before us with a recommendation, and it's controversial, yes, but they took a stand and I stand with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Joyner.
Just very quickly, Chair, James, is perhaps one of my areas of discomfort is first of all, let me just say that staff has done a remarkable job on this, and I appreciate it, and all the board members that have engaged in this. But we are being asked for an extremely high level of trust here, which is to authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign an MOU that this board will never see prior to that signature. That concerns me. Is there any ability for us to bring that final language back to the board for discussion and a vote?
Director Joyner, sorry, given the timeline, in terms of regular meetings, there is no ability in terms of regular meetings, because this, as I was, my last slide in my presentation, this really has to be done by all the signing agencies as soon as possible. So a couple of options, which
You could somehow, and I'm gonna look at the general counsel here to see if you could somehow ask to confer with they had a negotiating team of the chair and the 3 committee chairs. They were an excellent negotiating team. You could call a special meeting of the board if you want to, once you see the final MOU, if you want to do that. Again, I understand exactly where you're coming from, especially given the discussion this morning, right? So I want to at least give you some options with the risk of the time frame, with the risk of drawing this out. But if that is going to make you feel more comfortable, those are options you have in front of you.
If I could, Mr. Chair, really quickly, since I made the motion on this and you see my hand is raised, and I was actually going to make the suggestion that Mr. Corliss just made. I don't know that another meeting helps us, but if the 3 chairs and of the committees and the chair of SACOG, Mr. Jennings, you could engage with Mr. Corliss, Mr. Trost as they work on the language of the MOU. I'd like to add that as direction within this. I don't expect, and I wasn't in the room, I don't expect that that we're rewriting the language or changing the intent, but since the 4 of you were in the room in the negotiations, I'd like to add that as direction to the motion that I made, and we would ask the second if that's agreeable.
That's agreeable to me. Thank you.
Okay. Director Lozano.
Yeah, I will be really, really brief. Listen, we've had a lot of conversation today and everybody's good points. Thank you to staff for all the work that you've done and certainly my colleagues that have spent the last few weeks working on this. Thank you so much. Listen, we're not talking necessarily about the actual measure. The voters will have the last stance at that, or the last voice with that. What we're talking about, I think, is whether SACOG has a seat at the table. And without this framework that our colleagues have put together with staff and the other agencies, and including the campaign, the citizens group that's putting this forward, I don't believe SACOG would have a seat at the table or a say. And so for me, I think that it is important to at least be at the table if the measure passes and have a voice. And so I don't really see it as much of a rush for me. I've been kind of in the loop with this for about 6 months or so. And so I appreciate the staff keeping me up to date. So that's all I really have to say. Thank you everyone for your patience with today's meeting but this is a really, really important subject and I'm going to support staff's recommendation on this item.
Thank you, sir. Director Spokely.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. This might be in the first time in my tenure on SACOG that we've got an item that potentially divides the regional perspective that SACOG board members have been talking about for decades. I think this MOU does a good job of kind of mitigating those potential impacts. Obviously, projects being advanced and included if they're fully self-mitigating. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and a lot of time kind of hearing my fellow directors and their thoughts on this. It's concerning. I think that under the guise of us being a regional body and us not doing anything that's going to harm or hurt other jurisdictions within SACOG, I'm going to actually support this measure. I just made that decision literally a few minutes ago. The idea that a jurisdiction, and I know this isn't a county-led initiative, it's a community or citizens-led initiative. I understand that's where this is coming from, but understanding the full implications of this initiative and working, the work that SACOG staff has done with the group that's been working with them, and I've not been a part of that admittedly, but the work that's been done, I think, has all been very good work. We need to keep the regional perspective in mind, and if projects fully self-mitigate for their work and don't harm the other jurisdictions within SACOG, I'm supportive of this MOU. So that's where I'm at. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that, and I'll yield my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director Burris.
Thank you. I'm supportive of bringing the final MOU back to a subgroup to provide the final approval on it. I would ask that there specifically be representation from each of the other 5 counties in that group. So that is my ask as an amendment to the proposal that's on the table.
Is that in the form of a substitute motion, or is that okay with the maker of the motion?
So I would ask, well, 2 things, I think. One is, in the direction that I was proposing, it wasn't that the group would have final authority over it. That what I would like them to do is engage with the Kirk and James as they do this as kind of an advisory group. But I do want to stay with the staff recommendation to delegate the final authority to James to negotiate this and move forward. I don't know. I would ask on the other 5 how many were in the room before. I don't want to start a process over again. That seems to me to have 9 people gets a little bit cumbersome. But maybe what we could do is ask James to make sure that he reaches out to to the other 5 along the way, rather than creating a formal group of 9 folks.
Okay, so it would be an alternate motion then.
Is that your desire to put an alternate motion on the table?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So
I would like the group of 9 to have
second?
final authority.
Is there a second for that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Well, Mr. Chair, can I get clarification on what the motion is exactly?
Director Burgess, would you like to restate the motion?
Yes, the motion is to direct James with a group that includes the chair of the board and 5 representatives. Yeah. Sorry, to
Director Burgess,
finalize.
we're losing you, so can you restate that again one more time?
I apologize. Basically, it's to uphold the first part of the original motion with the amendment that the final authority over the IOU will be approved by a group of the chair, the 3 co-chairs, and the 5 representatives of the other counties.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sorry. So as I understand the motion, it's to approve the staff recommendation with the clarification that the executive director will consult with and obtain the approval of the chair, the 3 committee chairs, and additional representatives from each of the 5 counties outside Sacramento. That's what I understand the motion to be. And I also just want to add one other thing, just so that you know, because you need to know this. If the board adopts this motion, when we walk out of the room, I will act on your behalf to get an MOU that implements the measure or the agreement as I have described it to you. If that is not what you want, I'm happy to work with the executive director so that you can find other counsel to help you in that. But you just need to know that that's what I'm going to do on your behalf. So I owe it to you to tell you that, but that's what I understand the motion to be.
That is correct. Thank you.
So is there a second for that motion?
Can I ask for one clarification to that motion? There isn't a need to add 5 members to that group. We have 3 of the 6 counties represented by chairs of the standing committees and Mr. Jennings. So at most, the 3 other counties that are not currently represented in that way could be
I
added.
would concede to that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Stokely seconds that motion or alternate motion.
The substitute motion has been made and seconded. Will you please call the roll?
Okay, please indicate your vote when I call your name. Directors Baines,
Nay.
Bernasconi, or Potter-Schultz for Bernasconi,
Yes.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Houlihan,
Aye.
Burris,
Yes.
Clark-Kretz,
Yes.
Desmond.
No.
Okay, Frericks is absent, Frost is absent, Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Gore. Yes. Guerrero. Director Guerrero, can you indicate your vote for this motion?
Sorry about that. Can you get back to me? I'm just asking a question right now.
No problem. And then Boomgarden for Harris,
Yes.
Jennings,
No.
Joyner,
Aye.
Kennedy,
No.
Kozowski,
No.
Lozano,
No.
Middleton,
No.
New,
Yes.
Sander,
No.
Zaragoza,
No.
Sailor,
No.
Chenier,
No.
Stokely,
Yes.
Ballard.
No.
And I would like to change my vote actually.
Okay.
To a no.
Okay, I'm going to let the record state that Director Gore is going to change her vote to a no.
Guerrero's no.
Guerrero's no, thank you.
Director Soon had a question
Yes.
before you give the result.
It's not going to matter.
Okay, all right.
No.
No? No.
Okay,
just
sorry.
to
Let me just
clarify, no,
clarify.
Go ahead.
Was this on the second motion, correct? Not the
That's
first
right.
one. Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure.
Director Soon, can you indicate your vote for the motion?
No.
Okay, thank you. And then Thomas?
No.
West is absent. Motion fails.
Okay, let's go to the original motion. Does anyone need that to be restated?
I'd just like a clarification, Chair.
Okay.
So the motion is to, for the chairs of the SACOG committees to serve in an advisory capacity to SACOG staff in developing the MOU. Is that correct?
The 3 chairs of the committees plus the chair of SACOG, with the addition that we ask James and Kirk to reach out to the counties that are not represented, but not to have them as part of that group.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Please take the roll.
When I call your name, please indicate your vote. Directors Baines,
Nay.
Bernasconi, or I'm sorry, Potter-Schultz for Bernasconi,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Houlihan,
Aye.
Burris,
No.
Clark-Kretz,
Soft, yes.
Desmond,
Aye.
Frericks is absent, Frost is absent, Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Gore,
Yes.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Boomgarden for Harris,
No.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Kozowski,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
New,
Aye.
Sander,
All right,
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Stokely. Director Stokely, can you indicate your vote if you're still?
Yes.
Thank you. Stallard,
Yes.
Soon,
Aye.
Thomas,
Yes.
and then Director West is absent. Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you very much. James? Tell me
Proving
about the
that
workshop.
there is nothing easy about that process. So, so thank you, everybody. What can I take a temperature check of the room right now and the board members? We have an excellent speaker, as you know, but it is also 11:40. I'm sure Mr. Marone could say a few things as the board wishes. I would like him to do that, but I know that was an exhausting marathon that you just went through. Y'all good? I will tell you, as I introduce our speaker, and by the way, Citrus Heights Community Center, 6 p.m. tonight. If you can't make it, center staff. I've been following Mr. Marone for a long time, and I think what he has to say, and we all take a deep breath after that last item, is vitally important. It's vitally important because regardless of how much funding we can bring into this region, we will never have enough to do everything we say we want to do on our wish list. And so his message of smart transportation, fiscal resilience, strong towns, lean budgets is more important than ever, regardless of what happens the next 6 months or 2 years or 5. So Chuck is the founder and president of Strong Towns. He's a land use planner. He's a professional engineer, a retired professional engineer. He has a bachelor's in civil engineering, a master's in urban regional planning. And among the many books and podcasts and blogs he's written, my favorite title is Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. So without any further ado, Chuck Marone.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I'm here today to give a talk in your great community this evening. I'll be in Rancho Cordova during the afternoon. I had a chance to be in Petaluma yesterday, so it worked out very nice to come and sit in with you. That was very interesting. So thank you for letting me listen to that. As James said, my name's Chuck Marone. I'm the president of an organization called Strong Towns. For many, many years, I did engineering work, planning work for cities around Minnesota. In 2008, I started to write a blog trying to explore why our cities were all going broke. The cities that I worked for were growing very quickly. They were making lots of investments in infrastructure, lots of investments in transportation. Despite that, we saw taxes going up. We saw debt going up. We saw capacity being limited. We saw cities with massive backlogs of maintenance. And I started to say, how is this? Why is this happening? Started to write about it thinking it was a Minnesota issue. And people, as happens sometimes in the internet age, started to pick this up, and it got transferred around the country. People started to talk about it, started to be asked to speak in different places. Long story short, we formed a nonprofit, and I've been doing this kind of work ever since. This group presents an interesting opportunity to have a discussion because of the reason you exist. At the end of World War II, the economists around the president at the time were fearful that nothing was really different about our economy than what we would have seen prior to the war. The war, of course, ended the Great Depression, in air quotes. But when we demobilized all the military, we demobilized all these industries, there was a sense that we were just going to go right back into the Great Depression. Of course, we didn't do that, right? We recognize today what we did is we kicked off this great experiment in building a new version of America through the federal government, through funding of transportation, through funding of infrastructure, at the state level through coordinating this type of work, and to the creation of organizations like this, we were able to channel a lot of funds into building interstates, building regional highways, building all the infrastructure that creates this growth paradigm that we live in today. At the end of World War II, we can look at, particularly here in California, the geographic size of our cities being historically consistent with what we had seen. We look at that today and see the massive horizontal expansion. I don't have to talk about this. We all understand what happened. My little hometown at the end of World War II was 14,000 people. Today it's 14,000 people, but it's 10 times the area. That expansion was a big part of the success and the prosperity that we still nostalgize today about the couple decades after World War II. It's this period of a lot of growth, a lot of excitement, a lot of great things going on. It's important, I think, for us to step back and recognize that the institutions that this body represents, that rely on this body or work with this body to operate, were largely created during this period of time. Everything from the way we allocate money down to the local level, to the very standards that we use in constructing roadways and interchanges and bridges and what have you, were all developed during this period of time, very, very quickly, with one goal in mind, and that goal being to keep our economy out of depression. How do we grow very, very quickly? And if you think about the mindset of an economy that grows, it's one that operates like a machine, right? If you look at things like, I worked for many years with zoning codes. Zoning codes are designed to create a framework where a developer can come in, meet a code, develop property. When we look at building codes, it's the same thing. How do we go in and meet the standard and be able to operate? When we look at the way that this body is set up and the funding mechanisms are set up, you all have had this large struggle about what are the standards that will allow us to approve things? What are the standards that will allow us to make investments? This is the struggle that we've had really since the end of World War II. In doing this work and in recognizing that we have the capacity to grow very, very quickly when we invest in infrastructure and when we build new things, what our organization has examined and looked at is the local implications of that development pattern. If you are a local government, when you get a new interchange, when you get a new frontage road, when you get all the corresponding development that goes along with it, particularly here in California, where Prop 13 has some gravitational warping effects of how your budgets work, that new growth is really, really productive for us. Creates a lot of short-term cash infusion. It allows us to balance our budgets. It allows us to experience, in a sense, a moment of prosperity based on those large capital investments. But as cities, we also take on, as local governments, we also take on behalf of the community, the long-term liabilities that go along with that. We now have to maintain that road. We now have to maintain that bridge. We now have to maintain those pipes and that infrastructure, provide the police protection, the fire protection, and all the other services. When we run that equation out over time, what we see, and we've modeled this in hundreds of communities across the country, we've seen it again and again and again. What we see is that in the short term, we can be very cash flow positive. But as we run it out over time, those accumulated liabilities start to wear us down. And from a fiscal standpoint, we run far into the negative. We have massive budget shortfalls, and you all experience this, right? We experience this at every level of government, a massive backlog of maintenance obligations. I was able to do some work in the city of Lafayette, Louisiana. And that was probably the most intense financial study we've ever done. Lafayette, a red state, a red city, a very conservative mayor, asked me and a group that we partner with called Urban 3 out of Asheville to come and explain to him why their very prudently run, very conservatively run city was so far behind in road maintenance. And when we did the analysis, we actually looked at every source of revenue the city had. We looked at every ongoing expense the city had. We drew up different maps to show where those geographically were. And what we found was that not only was the city deeply in the red, but in order to get caught up in order for the city to maintain every road they had promised to maintain, every pipe they had built that they promised to fix, maintain every park that they had constructed, all the things that they had built, the taxes for the median family would need to go from $1,500 a year to $9,200 a year, an absolute impossibility, even if they were inclined to do it, which they were not inclined to make that type of a leap. And so this brings us to today. It's very interesting to sit here in a transportation discussion, recognizing that a lot of the currents that we have this conversation in are a result of the infrastructure bill that was passed last year. When that bill was first introduced, when the Biden administration came forward with what was called the American Jobs Plan at the time, the reception for that bill, regardless of where you sat on the political spectrum, was that this was a very bold plan. This was a lot of money. It was a very big, big bill. Democrats talked about it as being this, massive catch-up investment in infrastructure. Republicans talked about the size of it being very large and very reckless. Everybody agreed, however, that it was a big bill, bigger than anyone had ever imagined. But if you read the first page of the bill, you saw that the administration identified 170,000 road miles, major roadway in America that's currently in poor condition. Of the 170,000, this massive, massive bill only funded the maintenance of 20,000. The bill on the front page said there's 45,000 bridges currently in a state of disrepair. This massive, massive bill would only fund 10,000 of those 45,000 to be fixed. In other words, over the next decade, we were going to fund only a tiny fraction of the stuff that is currently in poor condition. A decade from now, we will actually have more lane miles, more bridges in a state of disrepair than we do today, despite the largest infrastructure investment ever in the history of the country. For me, the implications are very clear when we get to this level of conversation. When we look at the plans that Caltrans has to expand transportation systems, to fund transportation maintenance, all those plans are insolvent, yet they also rely to a large degree on infusions from the federal government. They rely and they assume infusions far beyond what is currently being received and far beyond what could ever be anticipated. As this kind of moves lower down the food chain of governments, we can look at regions, we can look at counties, we can look at cities, and we see the same thing. We see massive backlogs in maintenance, and we see huge assumptions for funding those maintenance that money is going to show up from distant places to help us out. As an organization, we are trying to wake up local governments, wake up local communities to recognize that a development pattern that relies on these other levels of government to fund our insolvencies is not a long-term responsible way to do things. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have to recognize the financial implications of our development investments. And that is going to mean a couple of very important things. The first one is going to mean that we actually have to stop doing expansion projects. I know that there is a long list of expansion projects that are going to be brought to you over the coming years. I know that there's going to be supporters for those and people who want to see those done. And I understand that this board is in a sense set up to facilitate those kind of conversations and those kind of investments. It's very difficult for us to responsibly make those kind of investments when we don't have a plan. And I'm not suggesting that you don't do good planning, but I'm suggesting that Caltrans, the US DOT, at nowhere at any level of government is there a credible plan to actually maintain what we've already built. It's very difficult to expand when we don't have such a plan. Second, and I think you heard this in a couple of the comments that were made at the very beginning from the people who were doing public comment, the demands on our transportation system are very different today. They look a lot more like going back and filling in the gaps. Going back and instead of adding more lane miles, adding more bridges, trying to do the next project, recognizing that what our cities need most of all is to thicken up. They need to become financially more productive. We need to get, in strict financial terms, a higher return of investment on our existing public infrastructure investment. We need to get more private sector growth on the same public sector framework in order to solve this insolvency problem. That actually looks like a very different development pattern, one that's very bottom up, one that focuses on the real struggles that people have to use the system as we built it, one that de-emphasizes growth through automobile expansion and emphasizes growth through biking, walking, and neighborhood type of construction. When we look at this through a fiscal lens, that's the only conclusion we arrive at. So I know that you all are limited in time. I was gonna make a little presentation and we were gonna chat a little bit. I can stick around for a while. I don't think we have to head out for a little bit. So if any of you want to talk on the side or what have you, I'm happy to do that. And again, very grateful for just a brief moment of time to share some ideas with you. Thank you.
On behalf of the board for indulging us today and listening to our conversation and being a part of it. And I know you have a lot more that you could be giving us, and I wish we had more time for you, and we'll create that opportunity to come back. But your presentation on strong towns, smart transportation, and fiscal resilience is something that all of us can learn so much from. So I will open it up for a few questions if you have time. Yeah, it's just a few questions if anybody has a question or comment or a thought that they want to have at this time. Okay, Bonnie.
Well, it's not a question because I think you just made some statements that to me were very thought provoking. So I wish we had had a chance to hear the entire presentation, but I really appreciate the comment about, we can't rely on the federal government or state dollars to solve our issues. I think we understand that. And I know that a lot of our programs assume that those monies will be there. And then just the point about more private sector investment, which I think I certainly understand and wish we had had a chance to talk more because those two comments certainly resonated with me.
Thank you.
I'll bring Director Soon on and you'll be next.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. I want to echo Director Gore's comments too. I wish we had more time. One of the thought-provoking things I heard from you was talking about why, if you need to develop differently, what active transportation would result in.
I was looking at the screen.
Oh yeah, no,
Thank you.
the voices throughout the
Please.
room.
Appreciate it.
No, the maintaining, why are you implying that because if you have, bike trails and things and sidewalks, that those would necessarily be cheaper than roads to maintain? Or
Oh, it's a great question. No, that's a fantastic question. Actually, if we step back a little bit and we look at the land use portion of the transportation conversation, we've done extensive modeling on where is the most, through the public sector lens, profitable forms of land use development. In other words, what generates the most tax revenue per foot of public investment? Where do we get the highest return on our public investment? And when we look at the way our cities have developed, you can almost draw a line at the Great Depression and World War II and say the neighborhoods that were built prior to that have really high levels of financial productivity. And as we go out in time, the further out you go, the lower the financial productivity goes. It's a direct kind of ratio of, and I think you can think of this in two extremes. If we think of a core neighborhood where you've got 10 businesses on one block, each of them has a small bit of infrastructure that their tax base needs to sustain. Each of those businesses may have something over top of them. There's a very kind of, traditional style of Main Street development that financially does ridiculously well. If we go out to the far edge and we take maybe like a drive-through franchise restaurant or a big box store, we'll look at those and we'll see the revenue coming in and we'll say that that's a substantial amount. But when you step back and you look at the amount of public investment that is correlated with that, the miles of pipe, the large amount of area, and then not only that, but as we showed in Lafayette, it starts to kind of magnify as you go out because each kind of extension of out is not just a linear, it actually exponentially starts to grow because you're adding extra pumps, extra, things in the system to get there. The costs actually start to go way, way up. And even though those are sometimes large investments, they're also enormous from a cost standpoint. So the conversation is really about where do you get, at this point, the highest return on your public investment? Where can we get the most out of our limited resources?
Absolutely. Director Stallworth.
In my lifetime, the entire interstate highway system
Power proposed it, it was started, and in California, that's a lot of hydro.
Right.
And so they were built a fairly compressed time frame, and now the locals have to maintain or are inside their own jurisdiction, somehow it's fallen to us. I mean, so all of this stuff is coming in 80 at about the same time. And so we have earthquake also every bridge over a freeway has to be a bridge involved. Isn't that a local problem?
No, it's not. Every infrastructure project has a maintenance echo to it. And what we can do is we can see a large explosion of investment in the 50s and 60s echo a couple of times. And we're now in the midst of that second echo. That creates this huge spike in maintenance. And I appreciate the idea that I shared some thought-provoking ideas with you. Let me give you one that I think will be less pleasant, but I say it respectfully. I think if we step back and look at the creation of the MPOs, the creation of councils of governments, the entire role was to allocate federal transportation dollars to build new stuff. We finished that project at the end of the 1960s, like early 1970s. That was done. And I think if we want to do a critique of government at writ large, there's a very fair critique that says a lot of government programs extend beyond their useful life. And I think there's a case to be made that the most essential investments we need to make right now from a transportation standpoint are not the large top-down cog directed types of things. Those are, in a sense, an anachronism of a system that we finished really 40 years ago building out. 40 or 50 years ago building out. But the investments we need to make today are very bottom up, very small, very neighborhood scaled, and they don't lend themselves well to this type of an arrangement. I think that's a structural challenge. I think you all kind of grasp that to a degree. I know what you're being asked to do, and in that framework and understanding, it's really hard to do. So I urge you to continue to have conversations like the one you just had and see if we can find a way to make those dollars as productive as possible.
That's great. That's great.
I have a comment about that. I mean, you're talking about the maintenance of the bridges and all that. I'm surrounded by bridges that are range in age from 60 to almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
And they're heavily traveled. And where I'm at, we have a lot of Bay Area refugees that move to the region and commute out to those areas.
Yes.
And then especially where I live, I hear about a wreck almost every day on these roads. So that's another problem.
And obviously we've made a lot of investments in an existing system and an existing method of living and getting around and working. And I think, you know, to the extent that we insist on that being not an anomaly of the 20th century, but the way things will be going forward, I think we're going to struggle, because we've, in a sense, run out the clock on our financial capacity to keep that pattern going. What we're really talking about is what would a pattern within our fiscal limitations look like? And it's going to look differently than the development pattern you have now. It's going to be more neighborhood focused. And it's going to actually say, yes, there will be people who will commute over those bridges, but there will also be people who have jobs that don't require that. And we see a flash of that with the work from home, right? We got during the pandemic a little view of what some of that might look like, but it's also going to include a refocus and a reshifting of businesses to neighborhood centers and to area cores, and a development pattern that looks a lot more like a pre-Great Depression development pattern than it does the kind of extension of the post-war kind of new experimental way of building.
Are there examples of that now in Minnesota where you are?
I wouldn't say that Minnesota is kind of the best example. If you look at the US, if you look at the North American development pattern, the further east you go, the more mature things were at the end of World War II. The further west you go, the less developed and mature and in place it was. So as you go west and as you go south, the challenges from a fiscal standpoint increase dramatically, because such a huge disproportion of what you built was built after 1950. So if you wanted to see a mature place that from a fiscal standpoint has a very productive land use pattern, the Northeast of this country is blessed in many ways with that. If you go to Minnesota, you see kind of a hit and miss because we spent a lot of resources tearing things down. And we did, develop largely after 1950. So we have a lot of the same challenges you have here. When you come here, the proportion is just much greater, right? The post 1950 development pattern in proportion to the pre-Great Depression pattern is so much greater that the fiscal imbalances get out of whack very, very quickly.
So Chuck, if you're already published, I'd like to get a signed copy.
I would be more than happy to,
And if
yes.
you are not published, I want to know when the next book is coming out.
We have 2 books out with Wiley Publishing. One, Strong Downs, is about the fiscal impact.
Okay.
The latest one, which is I'm going to be doing a lecture on tonight, is about transportation exclusively. My colleague and I are working on another book on housing, which is a very pressing issue that will come out a year from this September. So I'd be more than happy to get you copies.
And I'm be more than willing to pay for them. Let's give them a round of applause, please.
Thank you so much.
And once again, thank you so much for your patience. Okay, gang, we have made it to the end of our agenda.
Chair
The
Jennings,
rest of,
my apologies. We do have a member of the public that has indicated they would like to make a comment. Do you?
okay, let's do that.
Hi, Jeffrey Tardiga. You are live to make your public comment.
My apologies, because I'm also in another meeting, but interesting. I hope there's some reports we hear about smart towns. It was some years ago, I was made aware of the fact that we built sidewalks and never funded how they were being refurbished. Just a comment, some of the many things that is missing from infrastructure that is essentially needed. And thank you guys for having me back for a moment to hear what the world you guys have been discussing and what happened at the last board meeting as well. Thank you, and I hope I get the last word in.
No, Jeffrey, that's my job. I get the last word today. So we are at the end of our meeting. Thank you, Jeffrey, by the way, for those comments and staying with us this long. We have made it to the end of our agenda. The last items are reports, as you know, and they are receive and file items. So if there are not any questions at this time, we're going to adjourn. But before that, I have a present for you. And my present for you is that there are no SACOG meetings in the month of July. So I'm going to give you a break in the month of July, refresh, so we can come back in August and get ready to go back to work. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for taking a tremendous amount of time to be with us today, and look forward to you having a wonderful summer and coming back in August so we can get back to work. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Is it next week?